Hi, Internet. It's Peg Fitzpatrick, and I am here today with my book club. And I'm very excited to talk to Laura Vanderkam about her book, I Know How She Does It. Laura is a time management expert, and she is a fellow Penguin author. This book club is in partnership with Portfolio Penguin, who's an amazing book publisher, if you don't know them. Laura and I both love, I'm sure Laura loves them. I haven't asked her that, but I'm assuming she does. Laura, do you love them?
Of course, of course.
Okay. So welcome, Laura, to my book club.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So we had a few little tech glitches, which always happens on, with the internet, but that's okay. So I wanted to start with talking about how having it all syndrome is like kind of plaguing everybody, because we're all online. We see, everybody's perfect lives on Facebook and their amazing dinners on Instagram. We're seeing everybody's highlight reels all the time, and not really what people's real lives are like. So I thought maybe you could start by talking about how you manage it all, because you're a wife, you have 4 kids, and you've written books. And are you a marathon runner? Did I read?
I have run a marathon.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe you could share a little bit about how you started this and why you wrote this book.
Well, I wrote this book partly because I think a lot of the literature about women and work and life is very negative. We have a tendency to focus on the stressful moments, the times when work and family are in conflict, we're not sure what to do, the moments where life feels unsustainable. And everyone has that. I mean, I have 4 kids, I work, my husband works, like there's moments when everything is a little bit off kilter. But in general, I mean, you can have bad moments within a very good life. And I think it's important to look at the whole of life, the whole mosaic, as opposed to the individual tiles. And so that was what this book was about. It was both to advocate looking at the big picture, but also to show pretty intensely how successful women really spend their time. And so I went and collected data, time diary data on 1,001 days in the lives of women who both earn 6 figures and also have kids at home. So by at least one definition, have it all, and see what their lives really look like. And the good news is that their lives are a lot more balanced than I think most of us thought they would be.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's kind of like that when you do weight loss things, you do that, like you write down everything you eat, and you're always surprised, like, I thought I ate less, or I thought I ate, like, oh, I didn't know that counted because I was making dinner. Or
well, it's funny that you say that, because yes, nobody ever overestimates how much they eat. And it's the same thing with keeping track of time. In general, we have a very human tendency to believe that we work more hours than we actually do. We believe that we sleep less than we actually do. We think we have less leisure time than we actually do. And all of that makes sense. I mean, just because of the way you experience time. I mean, we naturally think we spend more time on things that we don't want to be doing than things we do want to be doing. But when you look at the whole picture, you can sort of take these things in context.
So what do you think was the biggest surprise that you found when you got all these time diaries back from all these women? Like, was there anything that really stood out as like the hugest, like, wow, I didn't think I would see that thing?
I suspected I might see something along those lines, but I don't think many other people would have, which is that they got a reasonable amount of sleep. We sort of assume that if you have a big job, you'll have no personal life. And if you somehow manage to have a personal life, you will never sleep. But it turned out that the women in my study slept 54 hours per week on average, which you do the math with 7 days in a week, that comes out to just a little bit under 8 hours per day.
That's awesome.
So that's actually, I mean, it's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
And I mean, I sort of knew from looking at some other large-scale time diary studies that it was quite likely that people would generally be sleeping close to 8 hours, because that's more biological than a function of how important you are.
Right.
But nobody thinks that way. Nobody thinks we get a reasonable amount of sleep. So we sort of remember the worst nights and tell stories about those.
Yeah, right. Our fishing stories.
Our fishing stories. I know.
Our fishing stories of parenting.
Well, you never tell the story about like, yeah, actually last night, I was in bed at 10:30 and got out of bed around 6:30. So that was 7.5 hours. It was good. You don't tell that story. The story is boring. Like you want to tell the story about how the baby was up 3 times and then you had to get on a 6 a.m. flight or whatever it is. That's far more entertaining.
I have to admit, I totally went to bed at 10:30 last night, and I slept until like 7:15.
That's great.
I was like, yes.
Yes, that sounds awesome. Celebrate that. Celebrate that.
I don't have little kids anymore, so that does make it easier. But the teen years and when they're older, still it's not as they're not babies waking you up, but there's different things that keep.
They're keeping you up late, probably. So there's that.
Well, I don't have to wait for them to come home, not that kind of thing. But it's just you never get over parenting things.
No, of course
just stay around. So, I loved your advice to plan adventures. Can you tell us about your list of 100 dreams and what that is and how people can use that?
Yeah, so this was an exercise that I got from a career coach a couple of years ago. It was just, people want to have a better life, and the first thing they often focus on is what they want to spend less time doing, and that's fine, but I think that's somewhat less helpful than focusing on what you do want to spend more time doing, because when you spend lots of time on the fun stuff, other stuff naturally takes less time. So this exercise involves making a unedited list of anything you want to do or have more of in your life. So it could be travel goals, hopefully some professional goals, random things you'd like to do on the weekend, any of that. And try and keep going all the way to 100. Because, the first third is pretty easy. People are like, I'd like to go to Italy. We can do that for a while. But then, by the last third, you're kind of scraping the bottom of the barrel. And so you're finding a lot about things you might find interesting. And then you can start trying things. I wanted to try taking a yoga class. That really was not something I've done much of in my life. And so I put that on my list, and I did one last Saturday, and it was fine. It's not life-changing, but it doesn't really need to be. Like, it's just, it's to try things and see what you like and see what you don't like. And as you figure out what makes you happy and what can work with your life, then you can start planning those things into your schedule and filling your hours with those sorts of enjoyable things.
That's awesome. Yeah, I probably when you do get, I can imagine 100. I'm gonna try it. I haven't done it yet, but I will make my list of 100. I actually, my husband and I did my whole travel wish list already.
Oh, did you?
Like my lifelong wish.
Well, you got to come up with some new wishes.
I know, that's what he said. He's like, now you need a new list. And I was like, ooh, a new list. So I have to kind of work on that one because I've already, I have to say, I feel incredibly lucky to have all the travel experiences that I've had. But so that was like, oh, I need a new one. So it's hard to rethink it. But
no, that is not a common problem to have. So another thing to celebrate.
That's a 1%er problem. Probably, right? Yeah,
exactly. Very, very first world.
Yeah. I just don't know where to go next. What should I do? So I also wanted to talk about your advice on good enough for housework. When my kids were little, my grandma, I had the greatest grandma ever, which we all do. I know all of our grandmas are the best. But she gave me fantastic advice, and it was just because I used to worry about I don't have time to do everything, and I can't keep track of cleaning and all the things that you think are life changing, and you can stress about them. And she just told me don't worry about it. Don't worry about the dust bunnies. Don't worry about, if the kitchen is done immediately after dinner, take the time with your kids while they're awake and then so I just stopped stressing about it. And I think that's something that a lot of people need to worry about, to stop worrying about is how do you get to the good enough? What is the good enough point?
Well, it's different for everyone. Some people, really feel like they can't concentrate if there's stuff around, which I guess if that's the case, you just need to own less stuff. So you're not constantly picking it up. But I think a lot of women do have this idea that you're being judged on the state of your house and more specifically, the idea that you can't go to bed with things being a mess, right? I joke about this being the 11 p.m. home inspection. We have this idea that somebody's going to come inspect our house at 11 p.m. And I don't know, you get demerits if But the honest truth is nobody's coming. Nobody's going to come look at it. The toys will just come out again the next morning. So, you won't get that time back. Use it for something enjoyable. And, you know, if you have particularly stringent standards and have trouble letting go of this, and this may be an area to perhaps get some outside help, and maybe would be a good use of resources to hire some housekeeping help to buy yourself more time.
I actually found this thing online. I think she's still online. I'm not sure. It was this thing called Fly Lady.
Oh, yeah.
Have you seen Fly Lady?
I have.
Yeah. I found her stuff. It was so many years ago. And it was like this little management plan where like you did so much a day and your house is like amazing. And as you point out, so much less time than you think it's going to be if you do little chunks, and then, you know, I don't know. It's pretty amazing. Like,
yeah.
I'm like a checklist kind of
thing.
Like, yeah. Like the whole little notebook. I'm like, you know, I got the dryer. I like that. It made me happy. For me, it's kind of a de-stressing thing. Like I just like to go in the kitchen and not have it be a mess in the morning. You know, like I just like when I get in there again, I like it to be like fresh. I realize the bomb's gonna explode again. And then that's fine. I like, you know, do it.
Well, but I think the question is if you feel like you have enough time for the other things in your life, and where this becomes more of a problem is especially when you have very little kids, and so you have less leisure time as it is, and you're tired, the keeping up with the housework can wind up taking away time from sleep. It can kind of take away the little bit of free time that you do have after they go to bed. And so in those specific cases, I think it's worth, you know, saying, well, maybe the house is not going to be, you know, magazine quality for a few years, but, you know, they will grow up and then I can make it look better.
That's what I did. It's worth waiting for. It happens.
It happens. Yay.
I don't know how old your oldest is, but it does happen eventually.
Yeah, my oldest is 8.
My oldest is much older than your oldest. So my youngest is 18.
Oh, wow.
So
so you're past that.
I'm way at the other end, which is nice. So I was going to segue into nurturing, that women excel at nurturing other people, but it's so hard to nurture ourselves. Like I will spend all my time doing other things, and then my stuff is always last. So can you talk about how self-care fits into time management?
I think it fits in a very important way. About 90% of the time logs I looked at for this project showed exercise, and that's, you know, way beyond any average you would find in the random population. And I don't think that's random. I do think that people who are managing to successfully combine demanding careers and a family have often figured out that it is so important to manage their own energy and to make space for that, for things that will keep their energy levels up. And so exercise is a great way to do that. And so I would definitely see people making time for that, even within their extremely busy lives. It became a priority. And so I think, you know, it's just a matter of saying, well, I can't keep going unless the supply of energy gets filled up again. And so what are the things that will do that for me? And so, you know, obviously, physical activity is something. Maybe it's you need sort of quiet time to rejuvenate. If it's reading a book or writing in a journal, maybe it's getting together with friends occasionally. Maybe it's like giving yourself one evening off every week that you just go out and do your own thing. You can trade off with your partner if you have one. Each of you gets one night. And figuring out what those things are that are pleasurable for you, and then making sure that they happen, because like, this is not the martyrdom Olympics. Like, there is no point being miserable. You don't get any additional glory for having made your life horrible. And yet that seems to be the mindset that a lot of people operate in.
It's true. That is true. It's hard enough. Don't make it worse on yourself.
Exactly.
Sure. Can you share a few of your favorite time management strategies that people could try?
Well, one of my favorites, if you do need to work long hours and you have a family you would like to see, a lot of the women in my study did what I call a split shift. So they would leave work at a reasonable hour, let's just say 5, go home, spend the evening with their families, and then do more work after the kids went to bed. And so by putting in another hour, 90 minutes after the kids went to bed, they were able to still work the kind of hours that would lead to these big jobs, these career advancements, and yet they weren't really trading off family time. They were trading off what would have been TV watching time, basically. Right. And so that was a trade-off they were more willing to make. So that's one of my favorite strategies is to think about how you can move work hours around in order to be more amenable to seeing your family and having downtime. Seeing if you can trade off sort of low value activities for additional work versus higher value activities for additional work. Another favorite, I'm trying to think like what are some of my favorite strategies. I think not being obsessed with email. And there's
I'm so guilty of that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, email is very useful, and I like email as much as anyone. I think it's a great way to reach out to people and explain what you're doing without, the difficulty sometimes of doing that the first time face to face. But it is, it's not like a dishwasher that it has to be emptied in order to be useful. And people have this idea about their inboxes, like I have to get everything processed. I have to get down to the bottom. I have to be clear. It's why, why does it have to be processed? Like people sent you stuff you didn't care about. Why do you have to deal with that? You don't have to deal with it at all. And so I think email is much like housework. It will expand to fill the time you give it. So you can choose to give it less time. It's sort of not the right approach to say, well, I'm looking for shortcuts to make me spend less time in my inbox. What's going to make you spend less time in your inbox is if you're doing projects at work that you are so deeply absorbed in that you don't want to go check your email. It's the same thing at at home, if you're reading awesome books and having fun playing with your kids and pursuing your hobbies and things like that, you'll naturally spend less time, like reorganizing the mail pile.
That's great advice. Yeah, I think I need to switch back to one of those plans where you only check it so many times a day.
Yeah.
Because that work, otherwise you're like constantly checking it, and it is just like, well, I actually hate email, greatly hate it. It's like my least favorite form of communication.
Yeah.
So let's see. You wrote about how making life easier is not about giving up the things that you want to do.
I found some amazing sort of like domestic and crafty activities in people's time logs, which was somewhat surprising perhaps that, here these women have these big jobs and also have family responsibilities. And yet they're doing these things that we kind of laugh about, the sort of Martha Stewart-ish type things, whether it's crocheting or, vegetable gardening or making elaborate cakes. I mean, there are people doing all these things, but it's because they're fun. And so, I tell people, well, make life easier. Like if there's a good reason you're doing something because you love it, or because it's a deeply held value, those are good reasons to do something that's maybe more difficult, more complicated. If it doesn't fit either of those categories, is it's just because, this is the way it's always been done, or this is what people expect of me. Well, then that's not, you don't have to make handmade, favors for your kids' birthday parties. You don't have to do anything for your kids' birthday parties. Just, call up a bouncy house and that would be fine. The kids would probably love that. But, if you love doing that, if you love making those little favors, I mean, go for it. There's nothing, we can still be in touch with our sort of feminine side, our crafty side, creative side, and do these things that are sometimes seen as a little bit retro, but if you love them, that's great. And so I think I wanted to be careful with saying, I often tell people to lower their domestic standards. That's one way to buy yourself time. But if there's something you love to do, that deserves a place in your life, whatever it is. And even if it's something that seems sort of old fashioned or something that, women have traditionally done, that's fine.
Those things are all actually coming back into style again. Being a maker and a knitter and a baker, I think Pinterest has resurged everybody's interest in at least pinning the things that they want to make.
Yeah, well, it can totally be fun. It's just, I mean, if you wind up not doing other things that you find more fun because you're obsessed with getting the perfect, bento box lunch combination thing, and your kid doesn't like the food anyway, well, that's kind of a waste of time.
Yeah, peanut butter and jelly cut off the crust. Usually it's probably
all good.
Is there anything else that you'd like to share that we haven't covered to give people like a better view or different view of your book so because obviously they're going to want to get it. But
oh, I hope so. Yeah, I mean, there were really, I wanted to counter some of the normal stories in this book. We have a lot of the literature on women and work and life is based on these anecdotes, and they tend to follow from certain story, like that here we have these stressful things that happened, and therefore I came to this realization that life must change. You know, I must cut back my hours, I must quit, whatever it is. And I wanted to show that, you know, you can have bad moments within the middle of a good life. And that when you look at the whole of people's 168 hours in a week, there's often space for all kinds of things. And the average woman in my study worked 44 hours a week, and she slept 54 hours a week. So you do the math, that leaves 70 hours for other things. Like, that is quite a bit of time. It does not seem surprising that you could have a fulfilling family life, a fulfilling personal life in 70 hours a week. And so people did, but you know, sometimes it's a matter of moving things around and being creative of when you do things. If family dinner doesn't work in your house, do family breakfast. If working out in the morning doesn't work for you, maybe later at night, maybe on the weekends, but probably there is space for whatever you want to do.
That's awesome advice. So again, here is Laura's book. I Know How She Does It, How Successful Women Make the Most of Their Time. Laura Vanderkam. She has a website. She's on social media, so you can find her. There's also links I will put in the video where you can find Laura's books and buy them. So thank you so much, Laura, for coming on my book club and sharing your book with us.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, have a great rest of your day.
All right, you too.
Bye.
Bye.